Thank you. So yes, we're really proud to have been able to run the tabletop exercise. For those of you who aren't familiar, that's where we take a real scenario that's happened and pose the scenario to the people who have attended. As you can see, we've had CISOs, head of InfoSec, pretty senior and important people, of which I am not, and they've given how they would respond to this scenario that took place. So it is, we do it under the Chatham House rules. It's behind closed doors, but that then leads to a problem of how do we share some of the learnings and the information with all of you. So fortunately, I was not at the tabletop exercise. So we're going to look at the lessons that were learned, and then I'm going to ask Francesco and Laura, who were there, to sum up what the learnings were so that we can get a little bit more detail from them. Laura's not going to be talking about anything specifically to do with her or her organisation, but instead just recapping some of those lessons that we learned so we can all get takeaways. So the first takeaway then was that there's a general lower confidence in cloud-native instant response readiness compared to traditional on-prem. So Laura, I'm going to kick off with you, if that's all right. What's the difference? Why would I care that it's cloud-native as opposed to on-prem?
It's new. That's in 2 words, it's new. So traditional security tools for incident response, they don't work. So that means that we have to shift from TradSec to CloudSec. And there's a learning curve, and then there's lots of firms that are adopting cloud-native technologies that still have traditional security needs. And so then do you have 2 teams? Do you upskill 1 team? Do you grow it? So there's a lot of decisions that you have to make tactically and strategically to make sure that you have adequate coverage. But I think that overall, everybody was a little bit. We've got some work to do still.
And Francesco, would you say that was the same thing, that it was without giving away too many details, was that something that was a theme across a large amount of people that were there?
Yes, indeed. So it was identified that these technologies tend to be more fast-paced, and more importantly, they have different operating models, right? Where the responsibility line between what you can do as a consumer and what the cloud provider, for example, makes available to you. So it's actually hard to keep up from an operational and security standpoint. The risk we have is that detection and response capability may not be at the right maturity level or correctly implemented. Overall, critical to keep in sync the strategic technology adoption roadmap of your organization with these very detection and response capabilities to avoid gaps and in general achieve a higher confidence in your, again, ability to respond to threats in such environments.
That's good, thank you. And for everyone's benefit, assuming that we keep to time appropriately, then we will throw out for any questions or for Q&A at the end so we can dive into a little bit more details. If I can make a clicker work. So the second takeaway then, no normal baseline behavior regardless of the technology. So what does that mean? Why do I care about that if I'm a CISO in a bank?
We have to know what's normal to be able to know what's weird. So if you don't actually know what a day in your organization looks like, or if it's normal for Ash to log in at 2 in the morning, maybe you are, maybe you're a night owl, maybe you're not. So you can't figure out what's weird to call it an incident, start investigating something if you don't know what's normal. And that goes across tech and business related processes.
Of course I do, if my boss is in the room, then yes, I regularly am working at 2 in the morning.
Who doesn't?
Exactly. Francesco, have you got anything to add to that one?
So in general, it was identified that technology is actually a means to enable a business mission, right? So, however, humans are still very important and still very much in the picture. So technology and automation associated with technology can introduce, for sure, a higher degree of determinism, which is easier to profile and actually allows you to focus on the human behavior. And this is not really to act as an internal police, but is really to detect and understand anomalies and what, in the context of being an indicator for actual malicious activity.
I mean, it must be incredibly difficult to do with all the information that you'd be getting for normal and to normalize behavior. But it's really good to see the takeaways, even if they are difficult things to achieve. And I suppose then something that I have to deal with on a day-to-day basis is ensuring the right people are in the right roles. But I mean, I'm looking at that for getting the most effectiveness out of my staff, presumably this is slightly different.
Yeah, it's more than just making sure the right people are doing the right job. It's actually planning ahead of time when you have an incident response, when you have an incident, that you have the right response team assembled. And it's not going to be the smartest person in the room or the specialist here. It's going to be the person with the clearest head that can just objectively look at things and help make decisions and help separate the craziness that happens if you have a major incident. So you want those people right away that you can grab them and dive in, and then also make sure that the people that are actually investigating the incident can do their jobs, and then the comms can be managed effectively also as well.
I mean, having been involved in major production incidents as opposed to security incidents that are going through, I know firsthand how difficult it can be sometimes sorting out the noise that's coming in and what's there. Francesco, you were taking notes from the in the main from everybody who was there. What would you add to this?
Indeed. So everyone recognized that a secure organization must be staffed properly at all levels. We got the engineering teams, we have analysts, incident responders, incident response managers, and of course CISOs. The fine balance that must be achieved is the one between technical skills and soft skills. As a matter of fact, the most critical role during the incident was identified as being the incident response manager, because this guy doesn't need to be particularly technical, right? They don't need to know how to isolate a workload on a Kubernetes cluster. But what they do need to know is how to maintain things calm and know how to manage stressful situations, and to, more importantly, gather all the relevant information to then take very informed decisions to progress on the investigation and eventually declare an incident and eventually all the follow-up steps.
Wonderful, thank you. And again, I seem to fail using a click. There we go. Francesco, I'll pick on you first time around for this one. I mean, healthy transparency when communicating internally and externally. So just make sure your messages are clear. I mean, it seems a bit of a given. I feel there's going to be more to this.
Yes, somewhat. So indeed, works again.
Up to your mouth.
Like an ice cream, they said. So yeah, beside of the right people in the right positions, is really key to know who to talk to in the larger organization and how, and to establish trust. Now, trust is achieved indeed through transparency. But of course, bear in mind, transparency is not necessarily full disclosure. We were speaking with security professionals that recognized the need at times to choose what information gets to whose ears to avoid worsening the situation or misunderstanding until the context was fully understood and built around the context around the incident response.
Now, the best thing about being here and getting to ask the questions is I get to use my superpower, which is being very, very stupid. So why, I mean, I'm communicating internally, I guess, to make sure that then very important people aren't getting very upset. What am I doing externally? Who am I telling? What's that all about?
Well, you might be telling the regulators if something, God forbid, happened, or if you've got customers, you might need to notify them, but timing's key. So you don't want to tell customers like, oh, we've got a problem, but we don't really know what it is, because then they're going to lose confidence in you. And the same thing, you don't want to tell the regulator too early, but you can't not tell the regulator. We brought up quite a few examples of other firms, not in the room today, where they waited too long. And actually, there's a recent SEC finding for an MSSP in the United States that waited too long, where they knew about incidents and they didn't say anything, they didn't disclose up. And so timing is key, so like to maintain confidence, but also be transparent. So don't try to hide anything, but the right information at the right time is really important.
Yeah, that is interesting, because it's not then just about managing the incident and the response to the incident, but actually there's communication that's needed and regulatory requirements. And so then that's coming into then the response runbooks. I mean, the testing and understanding them for technical and business needs, as everyone can read off the slides themselves. Is this as simple as a disaster recovery plan isn't a DR plan unless you've tested it?
Yeah, and who updates their runbooks all the time? I mean, I can't raise my hand, honestly. We've got lots of runbooks for lots of things, and keeping them up to date is really hard. So having response runbooks and then testing them, even in small scenarios, is really, really key. And especially when you make major technology changes, that's going to save your bacon every time. And it's not just for technology. It's how do you respond to the regulators? What's the communication template when we have to send something out to customers? It's having that so you can almost do it asleep when you shouldn't. But it's But that you can just do it and you don't have to think about it. It's already there for you because we've already discussed it, we've already agreed upon it, and so it's just already ready for you. So then you can focus on what's real and then gather the information and move on.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I appreciate not doing it in your sleep, but if you've already thought it through. Francesco, have you anything to add to that?
Yeah, so these runbooks indeed need to be accurate and complete, especially for cloud native. But equally important is to rehearse, and rehearse them. It is almost more important than obsessively detailing every single step, because these steps will very likely change at the next release of a platform. So runbooks, 100% aligned with the business needs and the mission, and they must be fully aware of the impact to the business about each of the steps that was widely recognized during the exercise.
That's really interesting, because one of the things that always gets me is that sometimes when we're moving fast and we're doing a lot of different new technologies and ways of working, that actually, a runbook is out of date as soon as it's written. But that's a good takeaway to go, that may be the case, but you're still running through the runbook to understand that where there would be a difference, that's okay, because we can handle it and we can move on from that.
Yes.
So, don't assume, and we all know what happens when you assume. You have to challenge your thinking each step of the way and ask the right questions. So, I mean, that is a lovely piece. I mean, these are genuinely things that came out of the tabletop exercise that people agreed, and these were takeaways. But I read that and I think that looks like a bit of marketing, isn't it? What does this mean then? Francesco, you can go first this time.
Sure. So yeah, this was the key takeaway, and let me expand on that. So you mustn't assume during the response, but spend time calmly to build the context during the incident. Each decision and step must be thoroughly informed by the context you are building. This will actually avoid rash decisions and overall worsening of the situation. And this approach is very important to make sure you don't miss something or actually upset someone as you reach out to the organization and to your bosses when you have to report back to them. So calmly understand the context, provide the right information when you're sure about things.
It is an interesting one, that challenge your thinking each step of the way and about asking the right questions. What was your takeaway for this?
It seems like it's such common sense, but it's really something that you have to stop and think. And there were more than a couple people that had raised their hands and like, actually, I've learned this the hard way, that you can't just like, oh, well, it's this, let's shut it down, let's isolate this. It's like without going around and saying, is this the right thing to do? And like, or maybe we should speak to other teams, maybe look at the wider impact and make a decision based off the risk appetite for the business. And so what you think is right may not actually be right for the business. So that was like a really key point, because like we all know what probably is the right thing to do in a vacuum, but it might not be the right thing if you were going to cause a business millions of dollars or pounds, or cause more catastrophe in taking actions without making sure that the wider impact isn't felt.
Oh, that is interesting. So it's instead of just going to quickly switch everything off, that could actually cause a huge bit of reputational damage or anything else, when in fact, or get rid of evidence that was needed for.
Right, might make it worse.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good. That's a nice takeaway. We do. I think I'm going to look and see if anyone's going to shout at me to say we've not got time, but I'm presuming someone will. Would anyone like any clarification, or is there any questions that we can answer? This one here.
The one I will sit on. All right.
Well, now someone will have to ask a question, otherwise we've gone to all that trouble for no reason. We've got one over here.
Please.
I just wanted to come back and see if you could expand a little bit on that very first point, and kind of, when we're talking about the new technology, okay, it's different to what we're used to running on-prem. Is it purely just the fear factor, you think? Or are there fundamental technical differences that are making it harder so the fear is justified?
I think that it is different, and it's a different way in how you think of things, like how you investigate like Kubernetes or a container incident, it's much different than how you would investigate a bare metal incident. Like my first thing might be to log into into a command mode when start capturing logs or do a TCP down, but look at processes, but you can't do that in a container or in a cloud native environment. So those things, and then tools that you can, like off the shelf commercial tools, haven't quite caught up to where traditional security tools are, just because it's not quite mature, but make no doubt, hackers have totally found a way up. So it's a new cat and mouse game. So it's exciting because you get to learn something new, but it's terrifying because you're kind of going in blind all over again.
It was quite exciting, actually. I spoke to someone today. I don't pitch product. I'm not trying to sell any product. And somebody was talking today about, well, actually, with the cloud service providers, you can get some deep insight into what's there. So as perhaps before. Well, I'll talk on in my experience, then, unless you've gone around and touched each server and know what each server in your data center is doing, you would regularly have to have a walk around to go and see, confirm that your CMDB was up to date. And this chap was talking to me and saying, well, one of the exciting things he finds with the cloud service providers is that instead they're able to get that inventory through them because they've got all it there. There's nothing spinning under a desk somewhere or an old Ultra 5 that's running something. Do you have anything to chime in?
Yeah, just to add having managed the security operations teams, there is always this sort of, I don't say disconnect, but gap between what happens elsewhere in the organization and the security ops guys. There's always this catch-up game because you got business mission. Other teams are really under pressure to build something new, deliver something new, and then they let us know that, oh, this needs to be monitored. So it's about rushing into integrating with your monitoring stack. And sometimes the tech they use is new to the organization and to the incident responders. That's why I mentioned keeping in sync the adoption of new tech and the responders and their tech stack.
Well, someone putting in a DevOps platform in a company one time, that's because you always tell me no. I try and do this fun stuff and you say no. No, I'm joking, of course. Are there any other questions? We've got another, minute and a half there. There's one at the back, I think I can really see. It's just coming to you.
Thanks. When you talked about looking at the sort of people you need in your response team, one of the things I came across an incident I was involved with before was also response fatigue. It was a long incident, and therefore we needed to actually have 2 people effectively for each role. Did that come up at all? Did you consider that at all in your scenario?
Well, it's more than 2 people per role, because of course if you want to maintain a 24/7 response capability, you need these guys need to sleep sometimes, right? So analysts, usually tier 1, they're perhaps less skilled, more junior. They look at the dashboards, and usually maybe 6, 7 guys. But then as of course you get to the, say, above them, you have a tier 2, and then you have the incident response manager. Those are, yes, they must be redundant.
What about when it gets down to the specialist knowledge? That's where we hit the problem. So yes, the SOC had that sort of structure and the ability to do it, but when you were getting down to the person that knows this application and knows where the bit is, that's where you come to those sort of crunch points.
It's about mapping out your key stakeholders in the org and making sure you have primary contact number and then the backup contact number to reach out to.
Would you say that when that came up, when doing the tabletop exercise, that was something that was aware, or would that come out through doing run books or rehearsing? What do you think?
I think, that when you do the run books, you want to make sure that it's not the most senior people that are doing just performing the run books, so they probably do it with their eyes closed, and so it's making sure that you make sure that new people or junior people can do those run books, so if something happens to that senior person, that there's not a gap. And then also a lot of making sure that people are in the right roles is when you're kind of thinking about what happens if we do have a crisis. So who do I want in my team? So obviously if it's an application, you're going to need an application specialist, but who does the comms? Who's going to be the incident manager? So who's going to be the face of this? And just kind of know that ahead of time, wow, I really want him because he seems to be so calm and level-headed, and he'll be able to just kind of herd people around and shuffle people out, let them do their work. So it's those people, but also definitely in the day-to-day.
Yeah, and you don't want to identify that you don't want to speak to me, because I'll probably have had a gin and tonic by that point, not be any use to anyone. Thank you for the questions. I really, really appreciate that. I've got the timer telling me that we're at 0. So I think we will wrap it up and say thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.